Okay, we're back in the studio with Lorraine and Shay, and we're exploring a little bit more this question of what can CEOs learn from social entrepreneurs. One of the heroes in the field of social entrepreneurship is Muhammad Yunus. Okay, he got the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in banking and microcredit, etc. And that's not usual that a business person will get a Nobel Peace Prize, right? So we're trying to understand and go deeper into the roots of how he did what he was doing, and maybe there's something that we can unpack that we can learn from him and his endeavor as CEOs, and see what we can do to adjust and do the big pivot. So I'm asking you students to read carefully and also pay attention here in ways that what is it that I can take away. It's a nice story, right? And there's more to it. So anything that resonated from that case with you?
So immediately, when I watched the YouTube video before initially reading the case, I know he went out and spoke to different banks in terms of, I guess, being able to continuously give money to the poor rather than reaching in his own pockets. I thought it was interesting that he said an option that he had was I could become my own bank. And that he was like, I don't want to be a banker, I don't want to do this, I'm going to find a different way to do it, and he still made it happen. So even though he, I guess in that way, he kept himself interested and active in the way that he wanted to be. Does that make sense? So in terms of an employee being fully invested in an organization that they're working in, they want to be, they want to make sure that they're interested in what they're doing, and that they have, that they're creating value through it.
So he was on a mission.
He was on a mission.
He didn't give up.
Right, he didn't give up.
Okay.
He didn't give up.
All right.
I thought that was important.
I think one thing that really resonated with me, and earlier we mentioned how do you value, profitability or something along those lines earlier. And there's this quote where that says, if you feed a man a fish, right, he eats for one day. But if you teach him how to fish, he's fed for a lifetime. And so I think with Grameen, I think the most fascinating thing about his, this case is that he's not only giving these, small businesses money, and just he's giving them the flexibility to kind of learn about, what it is to be a borrower and how important it is to, repay back, pay back, these loans, I think in the case as well, he also mentions how he teaches women how important it is to understand financial literacy. I think something along those lines and things of that sort. So he's giving these, small business owners the tools to be successful, the tools to basically give the ability to pay back these loans. And initially going into it, his mentality wasn't to ever get paid. His mentality was, let me give you guys the tools, and hopefully, it will circle back where, we'll generate money, and then from there, we're all able to kind of grow together and things of that sort. So I think that was the biggest thing that resonated with me, was that he wasn't he was giving them the tools rather than holding their hand throughout the process, giving them the tools to be successful, to make, everything go round. So
it was not a charity, ultimately, right? But let's step back a little bit in terms of process, because who was Muhammad Yunus when he started that?
He was a professor, I believe, right?
Professor at the university,
Yeah, he was an economist at a university. He had gotten trained in the US and then came back. What area did he come back to? I mean, he was in Bangladesh. And what happened in that time in that place? Do you recall?
I don't think the economy was doing too well. A lot of people, they were just living day by day.
Well, there was civil war. Okay, there was actually Bangladesh had just separated from India. Okay, and there was a civil war with Pakistan as well, and in some way that was creating a lot of problems for the population there. Okay, and imagine somebody coming back in the 1970s from a place like the US that seems to be doing well, trained and privileged, and sort of looking into a world that's completely different, right? Misery every day. And it speaks to the foundational humanity, right? Because if you are living among people with misery, how do you feel?
Miserable.
Miserable, right? We have these mirror neurons, and if we're with people that feel miserable, we also feel that way, right? Same way with happiness, it's contagious. So it's sort of like, okay, I'm in this place, I have this privilege, I want to try to do something, right? What does he do first? Do you recall?
I believe he just from his own money, or I believe it was small loans from his family. He just gave.
Right, that's the
money.
very beginning when he starts looking at people in poverty, right? But before that, even before that, you recall, he starts working with farmers, right? He's an economist. He is trying to help farmers to get 2 rice crops in, right? And therefore he buys seeds, and he creates the whole kind of program where he sells farmers these seeds and hopes to be repaid. And he's not repaid, right? Those farmers cheat him. And the whole program doesn't work. And if you think about it, this is oftentimes how we think about help, right? We're helping people, and we're generous in some way, and somehow it doesn't work, right? Actually, farmers weren't the poorest people. They were actually the middle class. So he decides to say, no, I'm not going to work with these people. Let me understand better who really needs help. So that's when he then goes out, right? And he basically does a little experiment. He doesn't know, he doesn't understand poverty himself, right? He doesn't understand what it's like to live in the village. And then he sees all these folks there and saying, you know what, they're producing stuff. They're micro-entrepreneurs. Why are they not richer? Why are they not better off? Because in the US, the people that are entrepreneurs, they can survive. Especially if they have these kind of skills. And so then he understands, okay, well, these people have a financial system that enslaves them. They can never pay back those loans. And those loans are very high interest loans. And why is that? What do you think? What did he understand in that context?
I think because they knew that they didn't have any collateral when it comes to taking out loans, so they made the interest high so they can get paid back within a short amount of time, and pretty much just be enslaved to the system, forever, pretty much. So they didn't want to take a risk on poor people, banks. So.
Well, the banks, the traditional banks that would give out loans, they would only give it to people who had money, right? Not to the poor people. So they wanted to prevent people from stealing money, right? Or just taking a loan and then not repaying it back. So it's an understandable kind of business model that you say, all right, like we do in general, okay, you can buy that house, but that house is mine until you pay it off. Okay, that's what the bank says. That's the collateral, right? You have to have property, you have to be rich in order to qualify for a loan to get richer, right? So it's a system that's actually rigged against the ones that are poor because they don't have collateral, okay? And he understood that, and he gave money to those people, and he saw once he paid off their loans, they were free. They could sell the products that they had produced at a market rate, and then all of a sudden they could live off the surplus. They didn't have to pay those high interest rates anymore. So what I want to point out there is he didn't understand much about the problem. And he immersed himself into the problem, right? Studied it, tried to understand what are the causes, what are the root causes. Most CEOs don't know the problems of climate change. They don't know the problems of social inequity. They don't know. That's not part of their story, right? And so if you go in there and you try to study it, and you're open and you're willing to learn, then that's what Yunus did. Then you can come up with new insights. That's when you can be creative. That's where you can understand, you know what, the root cause is not that poor people are lazy. It's not that they can't produce anything. No, it's quite the opposite. They don't have a shot. They don't get the kind of same conditions that other people do because they are not, they don't have the same conditions to get going. And then what did he create? You didn't have collateral. What system did he create that made that finance system work?
I believe he put himself as collateral for everyone at the bank, right?
As a creditor in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
He started taking out loans for people, and then they were able to pay it back. And so he was able to pay the banks back, and then that's when he realized that this is something that could work eventually, that can turn into something else greater. So.
And this is quite astonishing because the banks didn't believe that poor people would pay it back. Right?
I thought it was astonishing that he kind of created that whole new market that they were just like, that's not there. They don't have that. And he's like, well, if you open your mind and you take that pivotal, I guess, like valuation type of valuation pivot, you can create, I guess, benefits, and we could work.
I think like one thing I am noticing, you know, after reading all these case studies is that a lot of social entrepreneurs, they kind of have this mindset of being able to kind of co-create. So they go in with the mindset of like not knowing really much about whatever market that they're entering into, but as long as they know who they are, who they know, and like I guess the resources that they have, they kind of just like create as they go. And so that's something that I've noticed amongst a lot of the social entrepreneurship that we study, is that they all have that same mindset. So when you think of social entrepreneurship, it does, you know, essentially start with the mindset and then kind of just go from there. So that's one thing that he definitely had.
Fantastic observation. Fantastic observation. And I think students, that's something that I want you to sort of key in on. It's actually the constraints that they have, the not knowing, that allows them to understand and see differently, right? And oftentimes innovation is just dependent on seeing differently, putting new glasses on, right? Trying to understand something, not assuming that you know. And unfortunately, in too many organizations, the CEOs, etc., think they have to pretend to know everything. Of course they don't, right? But they are seen as strong when they pretend that they do know everything. And it's quite the opposite with social entrepreneurs. They actually get their strength out of admitting I don't, right? And those are the smartest people. They're up to learning, right? Like kids, I don't know. Okay, let me try to figure things out, right? That's where innovation and creativity comes from. Because if you think you know, then you will not create much new, right? Then you will operate as the traditional bank that says, okay, these people are poor. I cannot make any profit because I cannot really give them any credit because they are not giving me a collateral. Let's just go back and see how this sort of worked for this specific institution. He basically said, all right, you guys have nothing to give as collateral, poor people, right? The people. He actually didn't call them poor people. He actually sees them as people, right? And I think that's sort of something that's important also to understand. We're going back to this dignity notion. These social entrepreneurs see people as people, dignified. And he honors them by trusting them with giving them money, a small sum of money. The typical payback rate in a traditional collateral-based environment for a bank is at best 25 to 50%, sometimes a little bit higher, but not much more. The payback rates here in the microcredit scheme are 95 to 99%. Almost everybody wants to pay back. Why is that?
He said it at smaller increments, I believe, right?
Right, they were paying small increments, but there was a small sum anyhow. It was a microcredit. The point is they're paying it back at a rate that is unexpected and has not been seen before. Why does it work? I want to just pause it to you, students, also. This can work because he is tapping and honoring the dignity of these people. He sees them as human, not as poor, not as part of, not a market, etc. And he actually says, okay, I'm not going to give you charity. I trust that you will pay back. I see you as a partner in this exchange. And that elevates them oftentimes psychologically, saying, okay, you know what? I want to honor that trust. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, like a lot of times if a person knows that they're given some sort of responsibility, I think that kind of, you know, encourages them to perform well and kind of go above and beyond. And a lot of times if you have a leader, for example, Muhammad, you know, if you have someone that you're looking at who's, you know, exuding these characteristics, you will feel like you want to be just as good or even better. So I think, you know, the great thing about him is that, you know, again, he was giving these people the tools to basically, you know, come out of, you know, themselves and really be able to take on that responsibility to pay it back and to be successful in their own businesses as well. So a lot of it does have a lot to do with, you know, being a leader and what is that saying?
Is it the one where like you're supposed to lead your team? You're supposed to help them rather than just oversee or something like that.
It's not resonating with me right now. It's going to come back to me.
Well, something that sparks me is like a good leader is one that people are not aware of. Okay, so that basically everybody thinks they have done it themselves, right? When the leader steps away. So in some way, Yunus is like that, right? He's giving people the opportunity, right? And people take it. And so what I'm saying here, this creative process is a co-creative process, right? They understand and see people differently. They see them as people that are trustworthy, that want to get out of poverty, right? But because who wants to be in poverty, right? If they have a choice, if they have skills, etc., they can do things. They may just need to get the kind of opportunity to do so. And removing that constraint of the credit and giving them access actually honors their dignity in a way that they hadn't felt before. And then the ingenious thing is that he uses the drive to bond, the peer pressure, around it as collateral. It's a social collateral. It's not a material collateral. It's actually your word matters, and you are giving your word in front of your neighbors. And if you're not paying back, everybody knows, right? And what happens typically? People will peer pressure, exert peer pressure and say, all right, this is actually something that we ought to do. We are good people, we want to do this, and then they band together. And it's just that sort of part of the human experience that in this market wasn't understood, okay? And it hasn't been understood very well. And yet, this is a universal success story. One of the few of those killer applications, they call it, that can apply universally. So you have microcredit institutions now all over the globe. You have them in the US, you have them in Latin America, you have them in India, everywhere. So much so that they are the most profitable kind of banks. Which then brings in people that are sort of hoping to maximize profit in the context of poverty. And oftentimes that gives a backlash, right? Anyhow, I think what's incredibly important here is that way that you think about interacting with people can give you access to new business models, okay? If you want to do it that way. If you want to solve a social problem, you'll find a way how to sort of sustain it financially, okay? And he has done this not only with the banking sector, he is now working with the IT sector, he's working with food, he is working with telecom, and has been transforming these industries in these countries to serve the authentic needs of people, okay? And he calls this model social business. And I'm just throwing this back at you, students, to say, okay, look at this, look at and maybe study more on how this can be done. Because the big corporations like Danone, Oracle, the Nordic Telecom, they all partnered with Yunus to create new business models that would be much more in line with the bagel, okay, with the bagel model. And that's what I'm hoping that you can get inspiration from for your own company, to really understand what kind of process you can use to co-create these solutions and make them financially valuable and sustainable at the end. So thank you, and we're going to keep going, looking at more cases soon.